All right.
Okay.
Hello there, everyone. Welcome to some more Tapcaf transmissions episodes. Just the one for tonight, but maybe some other day we'll do two at once. Won't that be exciting? I am your host, Corey. I don't know why I said any of that. Joining me, as always, is my disappointed co-host, EckhartsLadder. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm doing pretty well. It was another fun week of reading. I feel like I've learned more and whatnot. So always a
Done
good
more.
day.
I don't know why you just really reminded me of the Trailer Park Boys there.
I feel like I did
Done
the
more
thing
book
in
learning, Julian.
book learning, and I heard about the internet this week. It was awesome.
All right, well, tonight's episode is about The Fallen Star by Claudia Gray. We will be talking about the Book of Boba Fett book or episode chapter 2 next week. And we're going to be talking about chapter 2 and 3 together. But before we get to the book, do you want to do like a quick 2-second thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett episode?
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was great. The second episode, I liked the first episode a lot. I thought the second episode was a big improvement. Um, it's kind of like what I was hoping the Mandalorian would be in a way, where the Mandalorian definitely got bigger than it started off. And I'm sure the same thing's going to happen with this too, but I definitely enjoyed the more kind of contained episode,
Mm-hmm.
like the
I mean,
world
he's
building
trying
they
to
did.
start he's trying to take over a galactic criminal syndicate, so
Mm-hmm.
eventually you'd expect that it does get a little bit more broad.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
But yeah, I thought the second episode was a big step up as well. So I enjoyed the first one, but I wasn't like super enthused by it. I wasn't like if the show was only one episode at that point, I would have like, okay, that was fun. But now I'm really looking forward to the next episodes, and
Mm-hmm.
I like what they're doing with even with the flashbacks. I think the connections there are cool. But yeah, so tonight, Fallen Star, the end of the High Republic Phase
Mm-hmm.
1. And they've said that Phase 2 is actually going to be set
Let's just go.
150
Oh,
years
spoiler
beforehand.
warning! Spoiler warning! Just because before we, that's not
I
really a
mean, that's
spoiler,
not a
but
spoiler,
yeah,
but
from this point out, though, from this point out.
yeah, the title of the book is a spoiler, but
Mm-hmm.
they're
That's the
spoilers for
weirdest thing about
everything.
this goddamn book. Yeah.
All the advertisements for it, the title of the book, they were like, yeah, I'm going to tell you exactly what's happening.
Mm. No, I agree. Yeah. So you were saying the next. I don't know. I don't feel very satisfied, I guess, is my kind of opening thoughts. As you were alluding to, the next phase, which will probably be, it could be 1 to 3 years. This, I guess, all of the High Republic's been a year now, right?
Yeah, it seems to be a year per phase, but the
Mm-hmm.
first or the first phase 3 book is coming out in October. So I think it's 2 books per year seems to be what they're going for,
Mm-hmm.
because it was Light of the Jedi and Rising Storm last year, or Light of the Jedi, yeah, and Rising Storm last year, because it is a new year. This year we got the Fallen Star, and I forget what the next one's called, but then presumably Phase 2 has books 2 and 3 next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah,
It's just for me, the story is kind of in a weird place right now. So very brief synopsis, because you can sum up this book in I don't have my slipcover on, but you can sum this book up by the cover of it. Um, the space station is destroyed,
yes. Uh,
and that's it.
we did get a few questions. Maybe we should probably just talk about the
Mm-hmm.
phasing and the future of the High Republic first. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, we got a few questions about whether we think that Phase 3 is going to jump even further back in time. But what I think is happening personally, and let me know if I'm like way off base, if this is too hot a take for you. I think after Phase 2, they're kind of doing the background of the Jedi getting to
Mm-hmm.
this point, and then
Mm-hmm.
Phase 3 is continuing on with the Nile stuff from where we're leaving off at the end of Phase 1.
Yeah, yeah. So, and have they said there are only going to be 3 phases?
I don't know. It
I'm
seems
just
like it.
looking.
I don't know if it's ever been
Star
explicitly
Wars
said.
confirms 3 phases for High Republic. So yeah. So there's Light of the Jedi, which is the first phase. The second phase will be called. I
Quest
don't know
of
if
the
there's a
Jedi, is it?
name for. Oh God, Quest of the Jedi, and then the third will be Trials of the Jedi.
which sounds a lot more like, hey, everyone's dead. We're dealing with the rest of that stuff. Because it doesn't seem like Trials of the Jedi would be between what we've read
Mhm.
here and what we're getting with Phase 2, or that it'd be even before Phase 2.
Mhm. Yeah. So yeah. So I think this is going to be phase two, like kind of what you were alluding to, and this is kind of my issue. Like when I read book one of the High Republic, I kind of had these grand ideas of where the High Republic was going to go, and I can't help but feel a little disappointed at the scope of the story at the end of the first wave. Like this was a very like intimate story in that intimate, kind of an ironic word because there were like a million characters who were featured, but the story itself is kind of small in scope.
Mhm.
um and I just didn't expect, like, my theory was that we talked about this a lot in our prior High Republic videos, but my theory was that the Nihil and maybe even Markion Row were going to be kind of the stepping stone and some greater threat.
Mhm.
Um, but it seems like this is pretty much it. That's kind of the feeling I'm getting now. I mean, obviously we'll learn more in the third one, but
Yeah, and I'm
yeah.
not even sure if like Quest of the Jedi has to be entirely in 150 years before, because I know like the
Hmm.
first wave of stuff is, because
Hmm.
the first book is dealing with like Porter Engle,
Hmm.
who was in the Rising Storm a lot, but
Yeah.
it is possible also that the first book there is dealing with going into the past, but isn't like that the whole phase isn't necessarily that. 'Cause I don't think they've like I listened to the High Republic show anniversary edition today before we started, and I don't think I wasn't paying complete attention because I was working on other stuff while doing it, but I was trying to listen for
Hmm.
whether they were saying the whole phase was that far in the past, but it seemed like they've only said the first, or they at least only confirmed the first book is. Uh,
Hmm.
so maybe the whole phase is, maybe it's not, but it does seem like the Nile are going to be like the enemy for the entirety of uh, the High Republic or whatever happens with these characters later. Uh, but
Hmm.
I do assume that like Phase 3 isn't going to be even further back in time. I don't think they're going to
No,
continue that
no.
one. Just
Like
clearly
the
still
way it
story
kind
here.
of, even the names you can kind of get an idea. So it's like light, or phase one, Light of the Jedi, kind of showing their zenith, I guess.
Yeah,
Phase two being Quest of the Jedi, I guess, showing how they got to that point, perhaps. And then the third would be Trials of the Jedi. So I guess the moment where the Order kind of
yeah.
breaks or some catastrophe happens. I don't know. Like for me, it's really disappointing, and I don't want to be too negative because I thought the writing of the book was pretty good, and I like the characters and stuff. But the fact that the entire book took place on the space station is disappointing for me. Like I wanted to learn more about the galaxy. I guess I wanted the story to be bigger than it was. Um,
I don't have that same issue because like I enjoyed the story for what it was,
you say you
and
did or
there's
you didn't? It cut out when you.
I don't have that same issue
Okay.
with it because like there's so many other supporting things for the High Republic as well
Hmm.
that having individual stories be in a more contained area isn't a big problem for me, because if you do want more of that, like a better idea of what's going
Hmm.
on in the rest of the galaxy, there's allusions to the stuff going on that are mentioned in the book, but you don't need to know it for understanding the book. And if you do really want to know, there are those other books and comics for it. Like there's a few mentions in here of
Hmm.
what's coming up with is it Daniel Jose Older that's writing the YA book for it?
I think
Like
so. Yeah.
the stuff going on Corellia gets mentioned once or twice here,
Hmm.
and it's about, and that's what that's about.
Hmm.
So like I don't have quite the same issue with it
I just
there.
like I don't want to have to read every YA novel or comic. Like I want to experience, and I guess that's maybe I'm coming from it from a not a fair angle, but like it's just this trilogy of books, like the main novels, they just, I guess they didn't have the kind of epic scope that I was hoping for. And
Like,
you can't only lay that on the third book, but it's just for me, it's like I was kind of hoping for a bit more each time, and I don't know if I got it.
like I get what you're saying, but I do
Mhm.
think that when like the complaint is that you want to know more about what's going on in the galaxy, and there is that, it's just you don't want to engage with the other stuff.
It's
Like
not
I
that I want,
understand.
yeah, but I wouldn't say it's that I want to know what's going on in the galaxy. It's that I want the story to have a bigger, um, like I don't want to know what's going on Corellia. I want the story to be more involving, I guess. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like for me, if I were going to write this book, I would have had the space station just be a portion of the novel, and then kind of like I just feel like this wasn't a like I want to see, you know, the rising action. Like I want to see the story ramp up, and I didn't really feel like that kind of happened.
Mhm.
I guess is what I mean.
Right.
Um, like I don't necessarily care what's going on Corellia or on the other planets. Like I'm sure those are cool stories, but like for me, it just doesn't feel like for this big epic kind of opening of a big event that there's been enough going on yet.
Like in terms of what the threat is, or
Yeah, like in terms of what the threat is, like to me, destroying Starlight Beacon doesn't seem like it's nearly as big as the hyperspace calamity in the first book, for example. Um,
yeah,
yeah, like it's a symbolic thing, obviously, but
yeah, I don't know if I agree there because of what they're trying to do with the story, or like what they're trying to show with how Starlight Beacon goes wrong. Because
Mhm.
part of the point of what they're doing with all of it is like it's not just some big assault or some galaxy wide
Mhm.
assault that's the problem. It's
Mhm.
that these small actions by these individuals get overlooked,
Mhm.
and that is what ultimately causes the problem that
Mhm.
they're dealing with. And they keep doing that throughout the book. They keep running into those issues.
Mhm.
So I think if they tried to make
I agree, and that's good, and like they are, like I like for example how like they need the radiation suits, and for some reason the radiation suits are on one part of the station. Just shows like how fucking dumb the Republic is, and like how like lazy they've become. Like I find that interesting, but I guess my main point, if I were to kind of sum up my main complaint, is that I was waiting for a hook to get me
right,
really invested in phase. At first, I thought phase two. I was waiting for a hook to get me really invested into phase two. Like I was waiting for Markion Rowe to have his call with the Darth Sidious like character, or to show that there's some greater plan or some kind of mystery on the outside. And I think the fact that I didn't get that hook
right.
would have been a problem. Like it's, I still like the book on itself. I want to make that clear. I still thought the book was good. Um, For me, though, it becomes more of a problem when we now know that phase two
Right.
is at least partially going to be set, in the
Yeah,
past.
like, I definitely agree with that. Like I think that leaving it how it is here, I think the book in its form would have been a much better introduction to going into the next phase as
Hmm.
like what is the fallout from this? Because that's what's
Hmm.
really interesting about Starlight Beacon being destroyed. Like you're saying, less than Starlight Beacon itself being destroyed is what is the impact of that going to be on the Jedi, on the Republic, and now that we either like they haven't said we're getting the rest of the story later, but like presumably we are in phase three. The fact that we'd have to wait a year and a half to continue that and are doing this.
Hmm.
I bet you're wondering how I got here moment at the end of
Hmm.
Starlight Beacon crashing down. That
Yeah.
I do agree is not like if you're gonna do that, maybe make phase two phase one and then
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
I guess they were trying to set it up as like, oh, this is the big problem we're facing, so you get the hook there. But I think you're right that the hook kind of misses when it's left uh, on this note for at least that long.
Hmm. Yeah. And like there are definitely some interesting bits too. Like the leveler, I think is a cool idea. I thought those scenes were really interesting. There's definitely that is one hook kind of where I think isn't that what they're called, the levelers?
I think so. Yeah.
Creatures. Like that's an interesting idea. Where are they coming from? What's going on there? We know a little bit, but it's just like it. And I don't want to kind of belabor the point too much, but for me, like phase three is still like it also still kind of has the same central conflict that we've all kind of known has existed since the first book. The Jedi have to eventually destroy Markion Row, um, and yeah, like just if you compare it to like I guess the original trilogy, destroying the Death Star is the goal of the first movie. I guess that's not really a good comparison because that's a whole trilogy, but I don't know. It's like for me, I wanted them to elevate the threat, even just the threat that was to be dealt with in the future. I guess.
Right.
Hmm. Or at least have some hook.
Yeah, so do you think that we'll still end up with some kind of hook back into the Sith at any point in it?
Honestly, I don't know. I definitely thought we were getting one. I thought we were going to get one in this book, actually. That's what when I like opened the book and kind of flipped through and saw an epilogue, that's kind of what I was expecting there. Um, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I've kind of been thinking since part of the Rising Storm and early on in this, like, could Elzar end up being one of
Hmm.
the Sith Lords of the period? Like, I
Hmm.
don't, because if they were, I don't, because he does this whole ocean meditation retreat
Hmm.
with Orla,
Orla, yeah.
and he thinks he's got it under control, and then he does what he does with Chansey at the end, where he kills
Hmm.
her. Where it's just
That
like
was
he
a good
seems to
hook
have
too.
such a big
I should
trigger.
give that credit. That was
Yeah,
really well done.
like I think Elzar's story is probably the most interesting. I mean, they killed everyone else off, so it's hard to. He wins a bit by default there, other than Avar, but because like they talk so much in this about uh how Stellan is supposed to be their pole star, and like they're kind of him and Avar's kind of guiding light, almost their moral compass, and then Stellan's dead. So either they go
Mhm.
with some like metaphorical route where like, oh, he's dead but he's still part of the force and then he can still act in that role, or that's kind of a inciting incident for Elzar to kind of go off the deep end a bit, because he's seems like he's made all this progress, and then he has that moment after refraining the whole book, but he's thinking at the end, I need to tell someone what I've done, and then
Mhm.
we don't actually get him telling Avar either.
Yeah, he just wants to get that little snooky, a little kissy kissy. Yeah, you're right. He's definitely the most interesting character. Um, I gotta say, when I read this book, I think this is probably the same as when I read the second one. Completely forgot who Stellan Geos was,
He's so bland. I
and
keep thinking
like,
of him as like the almost a parody character, like the one who
mhm.
you see a parody of at least.
Yeah, and like I was reading the Wikipedia, and I was like, okay, like remind me like what this dude's been up to, and it's like it only goes up to book one, and I was like, ah, shit, like I'm fucked. I kind of remembered a bit more as we went along, but yeah, I do like. There's other things I like about this book too. They bring in a lot of obviously a lot of the characters from the other novels, some of which we would have known, like Nan, um, and some of which we wouldn't. Like I assume that
Chansey
some
and
of the
Silvestri would have been from in Out of
yeah.
the Shadow, or Into the Dark, the second one, the one we haven't done yet, Out of the Shadows.
Hmm. So yeah, but I like, for example, I think I'm really glad that we did read the one we did, because I really liked Leox and Geoda
Yeah,
and Affy. They were cool characters, so it was actually nice to see them like, because a lot of people probably are just going to read the three main books, and they're in the young adult novel, right?
yeah,
So a lot of people would have missed them, but I think Leox's kind of fake out death at the end especially was a fun moment, and you would get very little, I think, from that if you hadn't read that book, because a lot of the, I think, kind of personalization of that character and whatnot comes from that other novel.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think like anyone who does enjoy the adult novels, I think would probably enjoy the young adult ones as much, in my
Hmm.
opinion. Like the one we've only done the one. We haven't done Out of the Shadows. I have it. I haven't read it yet, and we
Hmm.
obviously
Yeah,
haven't
me too.
read the next one coming up. But like, I don't find them to be substantially
Hmm.
different in quality or
No.
importance to the main ones. Like I think if you did read this, enjoyed it, and found yourself like if you thought Leox and Affy and Geode were interesting, like probably go read the other ones.
Yeah. The only thing that I guess I found frustrating about kind of the integration is the way the Drengir were handled.
Hmm.
Where like they've been touched on in the, like, alluded to, excuse me, in the three main novels, but like never really more than that. Like in the
Yeah,
second book, we see, I forget what her name is. She's fighting a Drengir, briefly at the beginning of the book.
yeah,
Um, They seem like an interesting enemy, and we even get them kind of mentioned a few times here, but they're all handled in comics and stuff, which I guess is like ultimately, if you're going to try to make a big multimedia project, that's going to happen. But that was kind of my personal disappointment, because I thought the Drengr
Right.
were a cool idea for an enemy.
Yeah. Yeah, because it does kind of mention that Avar's handled them off screen, which I
Mm-hmm.
think would be it probably is perfectly fine, but like we do get
Yeah.
that one fight scene with it, which kind of draws them into the story of this.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you're only reading this, it's like, okay, what the hell happened with that?
Yeah.
If it had just been like, oh, Avar's off doing that in the main three, and they don't tie in at that point, then it's whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that it was kind of like dangled in front of you, and then it's, oh, you gotta go do the other one for that story. Either include it or don't.
Mm-hmm. Oh, agreed.
But I was kind of wondering, like when I was reading this one, how would people who didn't read those other ones feel about Leox, Affy, and
That's kind of what I was wondering too. Because like they definitely did like a job of making them interesting characters, but obviously, there's less to work with if you're only reading the one novel. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear that too.
like just if people had any real understanding of who they were, or like obviously they wouldn't know who they were from the other stuff, but like whether
Mhm.
they landed the same way for people who did read that versus people who didn't, or is it just like a few pages of like,
Mhm.
okay, who the fuck are these people? But
Yeah. Yeah, like this book definitely doesn't necessarily hold your hand when it comes
no,
to like summing up what's happened. And that was like my thing with Stellan. Like I couldn't remember very much about him.
yeah,
Um,
I didn't
you know,
remember Orla or
I did remember her because she was one of my favorites. I was surprised that she was killed off at the end
yeah,
too.
I remember her after, like once we got the
Mhm.
association with Affy. When
Mhm.
Affy said, "Oh, Orla's my friend," is like, "Oh yeah, you're the one from that book," which made sense after the fact. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's a lot of like name dropping of characters, and you kind of got to wait until there's a relationship you recognize to get it. It's like
Mhm.
Nebesek, I wouldn't have remembered anything about other than like, oh, Buryaga said that's his
Yeah.
master, and I know who Buryaga is,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Orla, I just remember because she was an Umbaran, and they always describe her
yeah,
as white face, white clothes, white lightsaber.
yeah, she gets cover billing on this one.
Mhm.
Uh,
This cover is really weird. It has like a weird, I don't know, like quasi like computer generated look to it. I don't know.
it does, now that you say it, it does almost look like
Mm,
the uh, almost a '90s show aesthetic to it.
like
Like,
reboot or something.
yeah, they're gonna.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say reboot because I don't know if people outside Canada know what it is,
hmm
but that's it.
Yeah. Oh, you've seen that? You must have seen that picture too of the Yuuzhan Vong shaper, where it's like
Right? Yeah,
fully like computer generated.
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that
hmm
I wish you hadn't said that because I didn't see it that way. I thought it was like
hmm
I thought they all look kind of muted, but
Yeah.
now I can't
It
unsee
sort
that.
of looks like
Thanks.
that. Sort of looks like it's supposed to be like, I don't know, like charcoal or I don't know. It's weird. Ugh. Yeah, it's it's been throwing me
I'll hold
off.
it. I'll hold this up so anyone
Yeah,
listeners can't hear it, but the
yeah,
chat here at least can.
hmm
Hmm.
yeah. But yeah, Elzar's definitely been a fun character to follow. I gotta say, him murdering that woman at the end definitely was like one of the best emotional reactions I've
Yeah,
had. From where like I felt like his pure like it's not anguish, it's like it's regret and like just like I fucked up. Like I've
yeah.
made this massive mistake that I can never take back.
Yeah, and I think it's done really well because it's like it's something where it's so clear immediately that he has fucked up and he knows
Mhm.
he's fucked up and everyone knows he's fucked up. And it's like, oh, you've done this morally reprehensible thing and you've screwed everyone
Mhm.
over. But like it's also totally understandable how he got to that moment and how that happened.
And it's also too because he spent the entire novel trying his hardest, working his ass off to like fix himself because he's been having the touches with the dark side. So he's been working, to not like to come to terms with the fact that yes, he's always going to have this aspect of his character, but it doesn't need to take over him. And then at the end, he just fully gives in for 2 seconds and
Yeah.
just fucks himself.
I mean, it's also
basically.
a totally reasonable assumption to make. Like,
Mm-hmm.
these people they were arrested for being associated with the Nile.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
The
went
nail.
you went to talk to them. You're here at the one thing that you can do to still fix the station, and you see them there. What are you going to assume? Like, the people who actually did sabotage the station were there and were stopped by the people you are now seeing. So,
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
a lot more
Yeah,
relatable than Anakin going to a camp outside of a city to slaughter an entire population, as far as
yeah.
a dark side slide
Just because
goes to.
he wasn't having a good day. Yeah, so that was good, and now he's got, he's also got deaths on his hands too, like just the
Yeah.
people that were in the station that couldn't be saved because of him. And yeah, it was also like I do like the moment where you ever seen Hereditary
I don't
before?
think so.
Well, it's a very disturbing movie. It's a horror movie.
I've had enough disturbing movies recommended to me, or
Okay,
not
I'll
recommended
give
to
you
me
a bit.
by you, but
I'm gonna give you a bit of a spoiler. Okay, is that all
okay.
right?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. Good.
So the
Just
movie's
keep that
most
in mind
shock.
next time you tell me what to write an essay about.
Okay. The movie's most shocking moment is this kid takes his little sister, to a party, um, and she, on her way at the party when he's off like doing drugs or whatever, she bites a cookie and the cookie has peanuts in it, and she's allergic to peanuts. So the guy is trying to drive home with his sister or to the hospital or whatever, and she's got her head out the window trying to breathe,
Mm-hmm.
and she gets decapitated by a road sign, and it's very brutal, but the way it handles the trauma of like that the boy goes through reminded me a lot of this, because he does not know how to react. He drives home, he parks his car in the driveway, and he goes to sleep with like his sister's body in the car. Very dark, but it kind of reminded me a bit of how Elzar is at the end of this, where he's like, this thing just happened to me that's like almost incomprehensibly bad, and I just can't deal with it right now. So
Yeah.
he's just like, I'll just hug the woman I've been fantasizing about all book. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but that's kind of, that's what it reminded
That's
me
a
of.
great mental image. Thank you.
It's a very disturbing movie, but it's very good as well if you like horror movies.
And then he turned his sister into a walrus.
No, then the next shot, or one of the next shot, is like her head on the ground and it's been like eaten by flies. It's gross. It's got Toni Collette in it, and she's really good. Yeah.
Right. Maybe next week we talk about Hereditary.
Yeah. Speaking of deaths, though, what did you think of the way that characters are swatted away in this novel?
I like after the first two, I was like, okay, well, this is just everyone's just gonna die now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm mostly fine with it. I figured from the start, like either Stellan, Alzar, or Avar is gonna die in phase one, and I thought it would actually be Stellan last book. Like I thought he would just die in the last book. So uh, he lasted a book longer than I thought he would. But I think Buryaga's alive. We were both talking about this beforehand.
Yeah.
But it's pretty
Yeah.
gratuitous. It's like, okay, is this why you introduced so many characters? Because you knew you was going to slaughter a lot of them,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. But it's like it also, for a while, it seemed like there were some that were going to be off limits. Which I thought would probably be like Bell and Buryaga, but then they killed Buryaga. So
Mm-hmm. Who was the first guy that died? I could not remember who he was.
I don't
He was
know.
just like some Jedi Master. I don't know if I was supposed to know who he was.
He must have been like a comic character or something.
Mm-hmm.
Regald, I think his name was.
Yeah, Reginald is what they call him in the audiobook. But
What's his? Let's ask if Wikipedia knows whether he's shown up in other stuff. He was in. Okay, he is from the comics, and then first appearance, voice only in the High Republic 9. So yeah, for all intents and purposes, he seems to be new for Fallen Star.
Okay. It was
So
a like that was a character where like I found the second book had this problem a bit more because there were even more characters in that.
yeah,
Where like when I'm reading a Star Wars book, it's a Star Wars book. Like I listen to the audiobook for this one a lot of the time. I don't treat this like I'm reading War and Peace. I'm reading I'm reading a Star Wars book. So I've got a certain amount of mental capacity for character names. And like once you get past like 9, it's just like the next one in is replacing one out. It's like, yeah.
yeah. There's like
So like
four
he was just
characters that kind
never
of
really in
stick
there.
together. Yeah. He was growing on me for his brief time with us.
Mhm.
I thought he was fun
Mhm.
enough, but like he was definitely a red shirt as far as that goes. It
Mhm.
did feel kind of like some of the additional characters meant Belle got a little bit shafted compared to how prominent he was in some of the earlier stories. Like he had a few moments here, but it does seem to just be coasting on the same reaction to Loden, and now his next part of his story is probably going to be something to do with finding Burry, uh,
Mhm.
to kind of redeem himself from that. But
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about Bell. Like I feel like I remember Bell partially because he's the focus really of the first book.
yeah,
I don't know if he's like earned it, you know what I mean?
well, it just he gets that first book focus, and then he does a little bit in the second book, and then he kind of
Mhm.
comes more into focus when you get closer to Loden coming back. But
Yeah.
then for this, he doesn't develop that much more. Like uh he's obviously still mourning with the whole Loden situation and feeling responsible for that. But that state for him doesn't change the entire way through. He gets his win out of the saving the medical wing, but maybe it's partially just because like the next phase doesn't continue off from where we are, and it'll be so long before we get whatever continuation his development has. But yeah,
Mhm.
it does feel like he gets a little bit left by the wayside for it.
Yeah, and it's kind of strange too because they did from what I remember start him with the kind of interesting plot arc in book 1 where he
Mhm.
is really failing at a lot of these things like flying I remember or like I think gliding to the ground wasn't that one where like his
Yeah,
where he's trying to learn how to like jump out of a starfighter I think
yeah,
is the thing. Yeah. So I would have liked to see kind of that kind of plot arc continue and maybe see a more evolution of his character, but well, there's only so much time.
yeah. Like it's definitely showing him being more capable,
Hmm.
but he does kind of like get left with Loden's capture, and then he kind of coasts from there.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, and the writing too for all 3 books has been quite different. Um, so Charles Soule, I believe, wrote Light of the Jedi, right? And
yes,
that book was like kind of the opposite of this in that it was sometimes like unnecessarily sweeping.
yeah,
Um, and like a lot of it was talking about how the characters saw the force through different currents and stuff, which I really liked. I thought that was cool. um but in this is almost the opposite where you're getting pretty much solely perspective of characters, um and like kind of a literal usually like a literal representation of what they're seeing. So I'm not trying to say that as like a negative or a positive, just it's just a difference worth noting, I think.
yeah.
And maybe that works. Like I do think if the first book had started off like this in the phase 1, it would have been a little weird because you do need to sort of get that expanded scope for an opener. But
Yeah. Well, now that you
mm,
mention it, I think with the different ways of seeing the Force, like Avar's is the one that comes up a lot in here as well.
hmm
Like we get Alzar with the ocean, Avar with the song, and
Stellan has the stars.
yeah, and with Avar, she's another character even more than Belle that got like a lot of focus in book 1, and then just kind of disappears after that. Because
Hmm.
like she goes at the end of book 2 to find Lorna D, which is going to be its own story. But like at the end of book 1, she's the Marshal of Starlight Beacon, so she doesn't show up in book 2, where it's mostly that festival.
Mm-hmm.
And she's another character where, like, if you only read the adult books, and I haven't read any of the comics or any other stuff where she's doing more stuff, like with
Mm-hmm.
so many characters introduced, it's really hard to
Mm-hmm.
not just have her grouped into that mass of characters that you kind of don't have the same connection to by the end, despite the fact that it's the relationship between Elzar, Stellan, and uh, and Avar is so important. We never really see all of them together,
Yeah.
other than like one or two scenes in the first book.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. For me, like she almost takes on this like legendary quality,
Mhm.
where it's like you you hear a lot about what she does, and you do see her a bit in the first book, but even in the first book you're not always seeing things from her perspective, and later on
Yeah,
you're hearing like all about her. Like it's just she's just kind of an interesting character, but I kind of like in a way that she takes that on, but like in this book especially I felt like she didn't follow through with that. Like I don't know, I guess I was expecting more when she showed up.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
especially when there's such a big importance placed on like how the relationship between her and Stellan is fractured, and like there's the fact that they don't reconcile is obviously interesting for its own reasons, but
Hmm.
their relationship is one that kind of takes place almost off screen, and we're told it's this important part of like how they're interacting and how they relate to each other, but we never really see that in practice, either when it's going well or the fallout from when it's going bad. It just is this kind of thing that sticks in the back of Stellan's mind, where it's almost like a feeling of inadequacy related
Hmm.
to what Avar is doing, or like wondering why she can't just see that he knows what he's talking about or whatever.
Hmm.
And like towards the end, he has his own recognition of how he'd been approaching it poorly, but we never really see Avar's side of that. We never see Avar's side of
Hmm.
really anything, and I think that's something that we kind of miss out on.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a good point. I can't help but feel like if they ever did a High Republic movie, she'd have to be played by Brie Larson, who all the like the anti Disney people hate because she just looks so much like her.
Yeah,
And I just feel like Brie Larson in High Republic would just make people millions of dollars in hate
and they're
videos.
fucking grifting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that it'll actually make them more, because they already make so many videos and so much money off the videos saying she's been fired. Like, does she actually need to be hired for them to make more? Would that even really change anything?
Well, I guess on one hand you're also kind of on one hand you're also kind of limiting your amount of topics because you're compressing two into one. So
Yeah. Well, yeah,
sure.
they can't talk about Marvel and Star Wars separately.
Hmm. Um, my buddy messaged me about the book of Boba Fett. This is a kind of off topic. Well, it's super off. It's about as off topic
It's
as
a Star Wars
possible.
podcast.
Yeah, and he was like, I think Marvel ruined people because people aren't willing to just watch. And I guess this is kind of tying into my complaint too, ironically, uh, where he's like, they're not able to watch a show unless it has like some bigger hint for like
Yeah.
what's coming next, like a post credit scene or whatever. And I was like, yeah, it's like nobody's interested unless Thanos's like testicles like menacingly like off in the distance. And I guess maybe that's like a bit of a criticism in a way of my own critique of the book and the in phase one as a whole. Like
Yeah.
maybe it's fine that there's no big Sidious testicle in the background, but
Yeah, I think there's some other criticisms in other areas that I won't explicitly name, that it kind of ties into, where less your thing and more like not caring about stuff unless it's adding into something else.
mhm.
Where if like a series ends even, then suddenly the stuff in it is invalidated almost. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, like the emotional journey of the characters and stuff.
Yeah, it's worthwhile on its own. It doesn't need to be leading into something next. But
Hmm.
I think that ties in less to what your complaint was. I think your
Yeah,
complaint is more valid on what
yeah,
the impacts
because
are going to be
it is
elsewhere.
ultimately this is the end of one arc,
Yeah,
um,
like this is the
and
story that is very much unfinished.
mhm, yeah, Yeah. So what else do you want to talk about for this book? It was shorter than I thought. I finished it last night, which is usually I finish books the day of the podcast, but I had this done last night and I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, so
It's,
there's I guess the only thing I really want to say more on that would be just to be a bit more explicit. Like, uh, I'm kind of like what I was talking about with the Drangir and what you were talking about with the Drangir is that
Mhm.
I like that there's the other stories happening in the other
Mhm.
mediums. It's just that when so much of that ties into an important part here directly, like yes, Avar does get expanded on in the comics, but because she's so central to the stuff going on in the books, there are a lot of people who are only going to be reading the books, and to that's the area where I think it's a lot more valid to say like I don't want to have
Yeah.
to go and do the other stuff because the stories should be able to stand a bit more on their own. And when Avar is such an important character to what's going on here, not just in what she does for the Jedi, but how she's relating to Stalin and Elzar is supposed to be such an important part of the story, then I think you need a bit more of her in these books to show why that matters or what that looks like.
Yeah, that's always like the tough issue with Star Wars is like, I mean, I guess it's less of an issue, or maybe not less of an issue, but that like you've got to make something that fans of all levels can enjoy.
Yeah.
So like the Mandalorian deals with this when like character like Ahsoka is introduced. You need like if I ask my Star Wars friends how many of them know who Ahsoka is, like pretty much none of them. But you know, you also got to make stuff for people who have watched the Clone Wars and read a bunch of novels. So that's definitely um,
Yeah.
a hard, I don't know,
Well, I think
balance
with
to get. But sorry, go ahead, continue.
uh even with the Drengir, it's like those are technically different stories and it's a different crisis happening. I think the way they hint at that is largely fine, even though like the
Hmm.
it does pull it a little bit more in, and then you kind of left wondering whatever happens. But it works as more of an advertisement for that. But with the Avar stuff, I feel almost as if it's like they took the Clone Wars and made it two shows where you have
Hmm.
one show that follows Obi-Wan, one show that follows Anakin, and you're always told that these are characters that are important to each other, but one never
Hmm.
shows up in the other show. I think it's a bit more like that.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit frustrating too if you're somebody who does get really well. I mean, I imagine if you're someone who does get really involved in the comics, like if you've read every comic about the Drengir, I mean, I don't know. Is it frustrating then that it's essentially been relegated to a side story? Because I feel like at some point you've got to know that the storyline's not going somewhere because the books are ultimately the biggest attraction. The comic sells a lot from what I understand, but
Yeah.
I don't think it's unfair to say that the books are kind of like the movies of the series for now. Like the three main books are definitely the main attraction, I think anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, it does kind of mean that you end up knowing that uh the main thing in the comics probably isn't going to impact
Hmm.
uh the wider galaxy as much. But I think one of the things with uh doing a series that's set at in this time is always kind of going to be knowing what you're heading towards anyways, and that like obviously the Drengir aren't going to take over the galaxy. Uh
Hmm.
like the thing that's going to have the biggest impact is obviously the Nile and uh the kind of degradation of the Jedi Order.
Hmm.
So because the Nile aren't really the big galactic threat per se that the Drengir
No.
would be if they succeeded. The Nile, if they succeed, are eroding trust in the Republic, and we know that works to some extent, or eroding the
Hmm.
position of the Jedi Order. So the question of like how does that work? How do they end up getting to that position? Is going to be a bit more far-reaching than like do the Drengir come back or the Yamaxrin or something? And we
Yeah.
know like no, there's not a bunch of trees taking over the galaxy in Episode One.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of like my ultimate worry when they announced the timeline. I know we talked with this kind of back in the first episode about the High Republic, but I would have like that's kind of one of the reasons why I would have liked to maybe them push it back, say 500 years, even or 1,000 years. Obviously, you start running up into other potential stories they could have told,
Mhm.
but it does. They've got to find a pretty interesting way to make the kind of ultimate threat interesting or impactful when you know that they don't take over the galaxy or all these things don't happen. So it's got to be like, for me, I always assumed that I always assumed the High Republic would end with the good guys losing on some level, whatever that means, and either the Sith Lord that's kind of running the rule of two at the time gaining some big advantage, or uh, inflicting this kind of crippling blow into the Jedi Order that won't really show up until the time of the prequels. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily would have to end with like something Sith related. Like I brought up the Elzar thing, but I
Mhm.
think even if that happened, it would be kind of an extension of the character that goes beyond whatever the direct impacts of the story are supposed to
Mhm.
be.
Mhm.
But like I do think it's still going to end with a victory a victory of the Republic, but where they've clearly given up something for that victory that undermines it in some way. So
Mhm.
like defeating the Nail, but they've lost themselves along the way. Which is
Yeah.
kind of what happens with Elzar here, where they didn't get the best victory they could when evacuating Starlight. And it's because of his inability to manage his anger.
Mhm. Yep. Anything else you want to talk about the book? Do you want to give general thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think I'm good. Do you want to give your rating first?
Um. So for those who don't know, we rate on an F through S level, with C being our normalized average. Um, it's hard for me because I like this book.
And there'll be a link in the description, I
Hmm.
believe, for the
Yeah,
do I still have
I
it
think I
there?
forgot to include it last time. Anyway, or no, maybe I did,
Okay,
but
it's in the description on the video here at
it should
least.
be on the podcast as well. It's hard for me because I'm ultimately a little bit disappointed with not even how the phase one ended, but the kind of idea that this is the ending and phase two was going to be back in the past. Or so that's a bit disappointing to me. But the book itself was good.
Yeah.
If I could give it a C plus, I would. Um, I'm gonna give it a B. I'll give it a B.
Yep. I'm landing at B as well. Like I'm not gonna. I am disappointed that it is going to be so long before we get the actual continuation of the story. I'm not
Hmm.
going to hold that. I'm not
Hmm.
going to hold the book accountable for it as much.
Yeah, that's
But
fair. And
uh,
that's always the kind of difficulty with stuff like this. Like
yeah,
with Bane, we dealt with that a lot as well, where it's like we either like or we don't like a lot of what's going on in this book. How do you
yeah,
compare that against?
yeah. And I'm kind of taking it as a positive sign for the books themselves that I do care that it's going to be so long before finding out what happens next. Because like
Hmm.
I do really like Elzar as a character in particular.
Hmm.
I've enjoyed the stories we've had so far, Rising Storm and uh, Alphabet Squadron 3 were my
Hmm.
favorite Star Wars books in a while.
Hmm.
So, uh,
I'm just pulling up the list here to look up the rankings for the other High Republic books we've done.
I think we do need to fix the displayed page for it
Yeah, I'm gonna spend some time on that this
because
weekend, I think.
yeah, because I think it's generated out of the other options, but we have a few cut off. But
Oh, we don't have a ranking for Light of the Jedi up for some reason.
oh, that
Do
might have
we?
been one of the ones that we missed
Need to go back and get.
when Jameis was sending them in. But
Okay.
I think we both gave it a C.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of that one.
Or did we give it? We might have. Did we re-rank it? I don't remember talking about it in the re-rankings.
Yeah, I don't. Oh yeah, no, here it is. High Republic, Light of the Jedi. We both give it threes, so C's.
Okay. Yeah.
Or no, a three's a B, isn't it? Because S is one, A is two, three is B.
Yeah. 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 That.
Yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
yeah, anything else you
yeah.
want to talk about?
These
Any other general thoughts?
these for both of us. We do have. Do you want to get to emails?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Let me just pull it up on my phone.
there were a couple that I was going to respond to in email form, mostly questions about like stuff we've either already covered or we're going to cover.
Okay.
We did get a recommendation from Jeff to talk about Lost Stars for Valentine's Day, which I think we
Pretty good
potentially
idea,
talked
actually.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good
so
idea. Maybe we should do that.
yeah, so we'll try to line that up. Um, our first email then comes from Joel, regular emailer Joel, who says, "Today I bring a thought and a question. For thoughts, I've
Ooh.
realized when it comes to the High Republic stories, I prefer the YA novels over the full-on adult ones. I like how the YA and junior novels are more character-driven, which is more my wheelhouse than the larger event novels. As for my question, do you think that going back in time for Phase 2, they are subtly easing canon and audiences into the Old Republic and preparing for something bigger with that era as well?
I never thought about that, but no, I don't really think so. I guess that is one thing that will be interesting, though. But I, I guess learn more about kind of the ancient history. But I don't think that's their intention.
So Chad is correcting us on our rings. S is 6 and F is 1. We got
Oh,
it flipped.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry. Thank you,
Sorry,
chat.
I missed what you said.
So I don't think that's why they're going back to kind of
Yeah.
show us more about the Old Republic now.
Yeah, I think they're still unsure themselves about how much they want to bring in or not from prior stuff. 'Cause, like, the big thing is leaving themselves open to tell whatever stories. Because, like, KOTOR is going to be
Mhm.
coming up, so there's going to be obviously renewed interest in even older stuff. But whether that means they're going to try to pull it in directly, it's still staying as a Legends, like in the Legends timeline, how
Mhm.
it was. But whether they're going to try to build any stories around that, who knows? I don't think they want to
Mhm.
tie themselves into that too much. And I think after High Republic is done, they're going to jump to post Tross. Uh, like
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
they were probably doing High Republic when they did to kind of leave breathing room after the sequel trilogy, and then
Mhm.
do something post sequel trilogy next. So that would be my
Mhm.
thoughts at least.
Yeah, on the YA thing, that is basically the difference. The difference in between like YA, and we've talked about this a million times, but and this is something Alex kind of explained really well too. YA is really just about it's a similar story told through the life of a kid going through like that transitional point in their life.
Yeah,
Usually, that's pretty much how you like Star by Star
Lost
is probably
Stars.
not. Yeah, Star by
Oh,
Star is
sorry.
probably not a YA.
Yeah,
Maybe, I
it's your
mean,
typical
parts
growing
of
up
it.
and getting murdered by dogs story.
I mean, in a way, it's kind of a YA novel at parts. Um, yeah. So yeah, great question and comment. Let's see. So we've got okay. Adam asked. So for a while there was. So Adam asked, "Do you think Phase 3 will take place chronologically after Phase 1, or do you think that it's even earlier?" I think it's definitely going to take place after Phase 1.
Yeah, I think we're both on the same page with that one.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
We've
we
got one from Darth Croves who says, Dark greetings, my friends. It's Khalil again. I just want to thank you for reading my email and wanted to let you know how much it meant. My god brother has recently been diagnosed with Crohn's disease. One of my good friends in high school had Crohn's. Definitely a very difficult experience. So best of luck to your god brother. Also, just dropped my sister back at college with my family. I love listening to your podcast as it helps me get through it all. I also wanted to thank you for your birthday wish. One more thing, I got the Thrawn Ascendancy books. Want to know if they're good. We covered all three of them. I think two very reasonable people could read the Thrawn Ascendancy books and either put it as ones or sixes.
Yeah, which is almost what we did, except we both ended up on the same number for for all three of them. Anyways,
Yeah.
like I think it sounds like I'm higher on them and you're lower on them, but we ended up
Hmm.
ultimately liking them around the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're good. Uh,
It's like our periods are syncing up, but it's
yeah.
our book ratings.
They read more like a source book than
Yeah.
than a novel almost.
Yeah,
So
they're lacking a bit on the drama. Um, but you learn a lot about navigation and
maybe
yeah.
that's what it is. Like they're a bit more like a first person or a narrative history novel or a
It's
history
like
textbook.
Star
So
Wars if
that's
it
what.
were realistic. Like Star Wars, like it's like you could have Star Wars told by Charlie, which is Star Wars, and then Star Wars told by someone who lies less, which is the Thrawn books. Yeah.
I don't know if you had the stream Charlie was doing open at all last night. I had it open in the living room when me and Dana were working on stuff, and there was there was something Charlie said that was like, I think it was he was talking about when he went to go and see you, and he was talking about it as like, oh, I went to look at houses, and it was like that's not why he went, and it's like no, well he did go and contact the guy at the house he stayed at. So Dana was very confused by his statement, but I was like, yeah, if that's the biggest lie Charlie's told this week, we're doing all right.
Yeah, that's not how that works. Oh, brother.
But our next question comes from Justin, who asked, for Christmas, I got the entire Thrawn trilogy, The Heir to the Empire I got being the 20th anniversary edition
Nice.
with a special novella. Just finished reading the novella and it made me wonder something. How much of the Empire of the Hand's equipment is just Imperial equipment? Given how the only thing Thrawn used that wasn't Imperial was a small troop transport that was also a clothing store rack, seems a bit like it's mostly Imperial equipment. When we see Thrawn in live action, do you think he'll just have Imperial equipment, or do you think he might have a more diverse set of equipment?
Which novella comes with it? Mist Encounters?
I'm not sure if it's. I don't think it's Mist Encounters. I think it's one of the ones with with like General something his face.
Oh, Crisis of Faith? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So that's set earlier on in him getting sent to the unknown regions, when like it's mostly an Imperial expedition before he set everything up. The longer it goes on, the less resources the Empire has, so they can't really send anything in. So when we see the Empire of the Hand later on, there's more like Chiss and alien involvement, and the Imperial hardware and people are just like a smaller part of the command structure. Like I don't think there's going to be any involvement of non-Imperial assets when he shows up in live action. Like when he takes over the Empire in Legends, he's just coming back from the Empire of the Hand. He's taking over the Empire. It's none of the Empire of the Hand stuff involved in that.
This time he's been yeeted off into space and with his fleet and trying to build back up, it seems.
Yeah, and like had another author come around, like the amount of anything in the Empire of the Hand would have changed dramatically depending on which author had spoken about them next. Seems like Troy Denning thankfully didn't make it just be, oh, the Empire kept sending 30,000 Star Destroyers out there and they built more of their own stuff. But yeah, all the Chiss and Empire of the Hand stuff turns into a mess.
Yep, agreed. Did we have any more questions?
I don't think there were more. No.
I told you guys a lie because I said I would check podcast reviews before the episode, and I completely forgot. So I'm going to check right now, see if we've gotten any new fun podcast reviews. Let's see.
Well, you're doing
some really good ones.
There's nothing that's coming out in the near future, right? Book-wise?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it'll be at least October before the next High Republic. I'm not aware of anything else that's upcoming.
Yeah, it seems to be kind of a quiet time for books. Pretty sure there's like a junior novelization of The Mandalorian coming out if we're really desperate, but Star Wars.
It'll be a good time for us to continue on with the reading, especially when we've got a show to do every other week. So if we do a show episode every other week, then that makes sense with everything. So next week we're going to be talking about Book of Boba Fett chapter 2 and 3, so the stuff we saw this week as well as whatever's coming up next week. And then after that, do we finish the Corellian trilogy?
Yeah, maybe.
I think that'd be the 20th.
Yeah, probably should.
All right, so that'll be Showdown at Saunter Point. Speaking of big space stations happening, we're going from Starlight Beacon to Center Point. And yeah, that'll be the 20th. The 13th is Book of Boba Fett.
So 2 episodes to discuss next time. Have you been enjoying the new Wednesday time for them?
I don't know what weekdays are at this point in my life, so I don't know. I do like it better for the podcast because we don't need to like push it up to talk about Friday night.
Yeah,
it's been nice being able to maintain my usual working schedule and not having to reschedule the podcast. So I like it for that, but I think that's irrelevant to most people. So
yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if you have any emails or any questions, questions or comments, you can email them to us at tapcaftransmissions@gmail.com. That's TAPCAF transmissions @gmail.com. Make sure if you enjoy this podcast and the things we do, to leave us 5 stars on your podcast service of choice and leave us the kindest, funniest review you possibly can with your words, please.
And maybe just some sound if you want to put in a sound clip.
Yep. If you can do that, that would be great. All right. Goodbye, everybody.